Would you go out with me?
Sorry, I can't date you. As a new employee, I had just joined the company and was approached by the company heir. I inadvertently turned him down coldly, then his attitude changed completely.
Why would I want to date someone as plain as you? You're bothering me.
My name is Coleman. After graduating from the foreign language department of my university, I joined a trading company and found my work fulfilling every day. I was happy to use my favorite languages, Chinese and Spanish, and felt this job where I communicated with colleagues and clients was the right fit for me. Before I knew it, I was in my 7th year of service. Glancing at the clock, I realized it was almost time to leave.
Hey, the place we're going tonight looks great.
Indeed, I'm looking forward to it. My colleagues at the next desk were excitedly discussing a party. They were examining a photo apparently sent by the host, laughing and enjoying themselves. A party, huh? It seems like such a distant event for me. Even if I were invited to one, I don't have anything to wear. Thinking of my closet, it's filled with basic items like standard shirts, knits, and skirts in colors like black, brown, navy, and white. It's not that I'm not interested in fashion, but I always felt there were more important things for me. Plus, having moved from countryside to the city and living alone, I wanted to keep my living expenses as low as possible. Lost in thought, I noticed my colleagues leaving for the day. With no work left, I also decided to head home. I wondered if attending a party and meeting someone compatible could lead to romance. Raising my hand to my boss on the phone for a goodbye gesture, such thoughts crossed my mind and were quickly dismissed. Having never experienced love, I didn't even know where to begin. Feeling somewhat lost, I reassured myself that living at my own pace was fine and stepped into the elevator. Once outside the company, the wind on my cheeks was bitterly cold. I wrapped my scarf tightly and braced myself for the walk to the bus stop. The cold eased and the warm season arrived. The cherry blossoms brightening my heart began to fall, turning the streets pink. The petals dancing in the wind were beautiful, and I often found myself stopping to admire them on my way to work. One day, a new employee joined our department. His name was Mr. Watson, a male employee who had just graduated from university and joined the company as a fresh graduate. After completing his initial greetings, Mr. Watson glanced around at everyone in the department and let out a small mocking laugh. I suddenly remembered a rumor I had heard earlier. It was that Mr. Watson was a company heir. Although I had only heard it as a rumor, observing the director's behavior, it seemed likely that he really was the company heir. I reminded myself to behave respectfully, especially since the director had approached me to be Mr. Watson's mentor.
Miss Coleman, please take care of him.
Nominated, I nodded and began introducing myself to Mr. Watson. Weeks passed. Mr. Watson, being a graduate of a prestigious university, was quick to learn his job. However, he often left his desk during work hours, chatted with female employees, and started conversations unrelated to work, which made me anxious. Once, when a client he was dealing with called urgently, I found him absent from his desk and had to handle the situation myself. Later, when I found Mr. Watson and expressed my concerns about his work attitude,
I was just asking people about work-related doubts.
He defended himself. Such matters should be directed to me, your mentor.
But, Miss Coleman, you seem busy with many cases.
It may seem hard to approach me when I'm busy, but feel free to ask.
Wouldn't it be rude to interrupt your work? Maybe we could discuss it over a meal outside?
A meal outside? Honestly, the idea of going somewhere with Mr. Watson, the company heir, outside of work was daunting. It seemed exhausting to be so cautious. However, if you really wanted to learn about work as his mentor, I should listen, and refusing a meal invitation from a company heir seemed more disrespectful. So I accepted Mr. Watson's invitation.
I'll find a place.
And he smiled cheerfully. Seeing his untroubled smile, I felt a twinge of sympathy for Mr. Watson, always labeled as the company heir. On Friday, after work, I went for dinner with Mr. Watson. I had thought that a nearby pub would be fine, but I was puzzled as I entered the restaurant he had chosen. Inside, dim lighting and soothing music set the mood. Overwhelmed by the special atmosphere, like one for a couple celebrating anniversaries, I realized it wasn't the place for work discussions, just as I feared. From the appetizers to the after-dinner coffee, Mr. Watson barely touched on work. Our conversations revolved around my college days, my parents' home, how I spend my weekends, Mr. Watson's hobbies like yachting, and his social circle. Despite Mr. Watson offering to treat me, I insisted on paying for my meal. I then asked if he was sure he had no more questions about work. Are you sure all your questions are answered?
Yes, they are. I don't understand, Miss Coleman, whom I had always been curious about. Let me take you home.
As Mr. Watson tried to hail a taxi, I said, "I'll take the bus," and started walking towards the bus stop. Looking back secretly, I saw Mr. Watson getting into a taxi. What was he talking about? I couldn't figure out what Mr. Watson wanted. He said he came to dinner to clear up work-related doubts, but we hardly talked about work. How were his doubts resolved? I just wanted to get home and sleep in my warm bed. Feeling perplexed, I hurried home. After that Friday dinner, there was a noticeable change in Mr. Watson. He stopped wandering around unnecessarily during work, sat quietly at his desk, and responded promptly to phone calls. That was good. But instead of talking to other colleagues, he significantly increased his interactions with me. I answered work-related questions and ignored personal ones. Frustrated, he started weaving personal topics into work conversations. Occasionally, he complimented my appearance and personality, making me conscious of the other colleagues' glances. One day, I was working in a vacant meeting room to avoid Mr. Watson, but he found me there.
You don't have to avoid me.
Even I, inexperienced in romance, could sense that Mr. Watson had developed feelings for me. He approached and grabbed my hand, which was typing on the laptop. Startled, I instinctively pulled away. "I can't be in a relationship with you, Mr. Watson." Thinking back, maybe I was too cold. Mr. Watson, with wide eyes, left me alone in the meeting room. During lunch, I noticed colleagues near the entrance shop. They were whispering as soon as they saw me. What was going on? That was the first sign of discomfort. From then on, my colleagues' attitudes towards me grew colder. They hardly responded to my greetings, let alone engage in small talk or work-related discussions. Confused and at a loss, I wanted to understand why, but everyone seemed to be acting the same way.
I don't think anyone trusts Miss Coleman anymore.
Mr. Watson approached me as I was away from my desk, distressed. "What do you mean?"
People who don't know their place are a problem. Someone plain like you probably doesn't look properly in the mirror. That's why you can delude yourself.
What delusions are you talking about?
Why would I want to date someone like you? It's unpleasant. You're a nuisance.
Hearing Mr. Watson's words, I finally understood everything. It seemed I was misunderstood as a woman who, thinking she was being courted, had been pressuring colleagues. Probably Mr. Watson spread this rumor. Despite him holding my hand, suggesting his interest, he turned it around on me. The thought of him doing this out of spite made me tremble with fear. But the real terror was yet to come. Colleagues whom I had worked with for a long time and thought would not believe Mr. Watson's words suddenly changed their behavior towards me. Their harsh words and cold attitudes gradually wore me down. Once when I tried to finish a task for a busy Mr. Watson, he snapped at me.
"This is my work. I don't like you touching it without permission. Don't interfere."
"She's always so quick to jump in." Others laughed over someone's remark. That was my breaking point. I broke down silently, and before I knew it, I had left the office. When I regained my senses, I was at home, staring at the night sky and a faint crescent moon through the curtains. Seeing my distress, the company later transferred me to a small branch in the suburbs. Though I wanted to continue working at the headquarters where I could gain more experience, part of me felt relieved to leave that toxic environment, which saddened me. As I left the office where I had worked hard for 7 years, my colleagues sent me off with a mixture of guilt and concern. Holding the farewell bouquet, I thought about how everyone must have felt pressured to confirm to Mr. Watson the company heir. But regardless of what they thought, their cold attitudes and words had deeply hurt me. Confused and without answers, my last day at the headquarters ended. My new workplace was in a green regional city. Driving to work every morning, I enjoyed the light traffic and absence of congestion. The view from my window eased my mind, slowly melting away the unresolved issues from the headquarters. After nearly 6 months at the new office, I became the section chief. With my experience from the headquarters, I was able to help my new colleagues, gradually regaining my confidence with their gratitude. Young and pretty women like you are always welcome here. The colleagues at the branch like to joke around, and the older employees often make light comments like that. Honestly, even if it's a joke, comments about my appearance hurt. They remind me of Mr. Watson and my days at the headquarters, leaving me at a loss for words, but then help came my way.
Isn't that kind of comment bordering on sexual harassment?
As I struggled to respond, Mr. Brooks, a senior colleague at the branch, came to my rescue.
I'm sorry, Miss Coleman. Be more mindful.
The colleagues nearly laughed, creating a warm and friendly atmosphere that eased the end of the conversation. When Mr. Brooks sat at the desk opposite me, and I nodded in acknowledgement, he responded with a bright smile. He really is like a sunflower, I thought. Mr. Brooks, with his bright and approachable personality, was like the mood maker of our branch. He was competent at his work and I had often sought his help. His presence, surrounded by colleagues who admired him, felt reassuring and shone like the sun, especially during my initial tough days after the transfer. One day, not long after my move, this happened. Not in the mood for chatting, I sat on a bench near the parking lot, quietly eating a sandwich and frozen fried chicken I had bought for lunch.
You made your own lunch bag? That's commendable.
Mr. Brooks appeared beside me unexpectedly. It's just something simple. Trying to keep my voice cheerful, Mr. Brooks engaged in some trivial small talk before saying,
I might be speaking out of turn here, but
he prefaced,
you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I have a contact at the headquarters who told me about the circumstances of Miss Coleman's transfer.
My heart started racing. What if Mr. Brooks believed the rumors, but his words were kind and comforting?
I've heard about your character and work reputation. It must have been tough, but most people don't believe those baseless rumors. Let's work hard together in this new place.
Thank you, I said, feeling relieved and unexpectedly standing up. I noticed then that Mr. Brooks was quite short, about my height or maybe even slightly shorter. I wondered why he always seemed so large and dependable in the office. It was as if his unassuming and endearing presence had a disarming effect, easing any sense of caution.
Let's do our best,
he said, and I nodded emphatically. As my relationship with my colleagues grew stronger and my job responsibilities expanded with my promotion, my motivation increased. Then, a young sales representative made a mistake by forgetting a client meeting. Although the error was covered by other sales staff and resolved without major issues, a deep conversation with the young representative revealed a struggle with the workload. I saw this as an opportunity to rethink our work methods. With Mr. Brooks and few veteran employees, we formed a team to discuss job assignments, flexible working hours for parenting, and various other aspects. Through individual interviews to understand everyone's situation, we adjusted and soon saw changes. Despite reduced overtime, productivity clearly increased and the branch's performance improved rapidly. Our team was thrilled with the success, and upon receiving a request from the headquarters to explain our rapid improvement, Mr. Brooks and I were chosen to represent the branch. Entering the headquarters again after a long time brought back nostalgic scenes. I had feared that the memories of my difficult days before the transfer would haunt me, but instead I felt proud of my old workplace and wasn't perturbed. In fact, I stood there proudly, feeling honored by our achievements. As employees from the headquarters complimented us, Mr. Brooks and I exchanged pleased glances. While discussing where to head next, a familiar voice stopped us in our tracks, making my heart leap. It was Mr. Watson.
The president has requested to see you. Please, follow me.
Mr. Brooks stepped forward to lead the way, shielding me as we headed to the president's office. Upon entering the room after a knock, the president greeted us with a smile.
I have heard of your achievements. It's excellent that you have tackled improving the work environment. The system is well thought out. We would like to implement it at the headquarters too. Thank you. The detailed plan was mainly developed by Miss Coleman here. I couldn't have done it alone. So, you're Miss Coleman. Mr. Brooks, who has an impressive sales record, speaks highly of you. Such a capable person should marry Richard and support the company. I'm open to that idea. After all, we have worked together before, and we even enjoyed a meal at a fancy restaurant. Is that so? Then this will be a quick conversation.
As the conversation took an absurd turn, I showed my refusal. I must decline that offer.
Mr. Brooks spoke up in my support. Is he the president's son? Yes, he's currently gaining practical experience at the headquarters for his future. I've heard from colleagues here about frequent, unexcused absences disrupting work, poor treatment of women, baseless accusations, and intrusive personal conversations interfering with other employees' tasks. That's a lie. We have evidence.
Mr. Brooks played a video on his mobile phone showing Mr. Watson's work attitude.
This was filmed by a colleague at the headquarters. They felt guilty about filming without permission, but everyone's productivity was dropping, and it seemed like the only way to address it. This is a matter that affects the company's profit and loss.
While I was confused, Mr. Brooks continued to push the conversation forward.
Despite her outstanding performance, Miss Cole was unfairly transferred due to baseless rumors spread by your son. I have compiled statements from employees who worked in the same department at the time. Please have a look.
Shocked by Mr. Brooks' initiative, I was speechless. After reading the documents, the president in a low voice asked his son to explain.
Richard, what is this about? Dad, this,
The president, seemingly angry upon learning about his son's conduct, glared at Mr. Watson. In a fluster, Mr. Watson tried to talk his way out, but we left the president's office, leaving him behind. A few weeks later, during a quiet break when the office was empty, I was admiring the vibrant green of the mountains outside the window when Mr. Brooks came over and shared some news. Apparently, Mr. Watson had been let go from the company following the incident in the president's office. The president, infuriated, offered no help, and Mr. Watson had trouble finding another job, causing a stir until his final day. That's the trouble with being a company heir, I thought, feeling somewhat detached.
Does it give you some closure?
Mr. Brooks jokingly asked. It's irrelevant to me, I replied, opening a new project file.
You have a beautiful face, Miss Coleman,
he said after a pause. My hand stopped in surprise, but surprisingly, I didn't feel uncomfortable being complimented on my appearance. In fact, I was pleased. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks continued with a shy smile. You're very beautiful, without much makeup, not wearing flashy clothes. Simple and unadorned, yet you work and smile happily. That's really nice.
Hearing him say that, I thought Mr. Brooks himself was really nice. So I told him just that.
Thank you.
Mr. Brooks, smiling in response, still had that cute sunflower-like quality, yet seemed as dependable and significant as the sun. Soon, we began meeting outside work somewhat like casual dates. Our branch's performance continued to excel, and the labor improvement system I developed was making a positive impact at the headquarters. Though there were times of despair, the supportive environment with trusted colleagues made it all worthwhile. Maybe it was even a blessing in disguise. It seemed that even seemingly adverse events could lead to good outcomes if one stays sincere. Lately, I have been feeling the profound depths of life more